So, starting with Rawiri, Oriini, you picked up on something that he said that Meka was coming home.
Yeah, I've been watching this week, obviously, for good reason. What strikes me is the whole phrase, well, a lot strikes me, but saying she's come home. In my idea, I thought she's always been home. Ikaroa Rāwhiti is her home. To say that she's gone from Labour to the Māori Party and that's home, I'm kind of a bit confused about that. Like, are they telling us that Labour wasn't actually the place for her, although she spent 10 years prior to becoming an MP with Parikura Horomia? I thought that was her home. So I'm a little bit confused about the message or the underlying messages that aren't being said on that front. So I'm confused. What is home? Because home as a Māori is where your people are, where your roots are, and they've always been for her in Te Tai Rāwhiti.
Well, there's a lot of confusion around Meka's exit. What do you think has gone on here? It sounded like personal ambitions.
I think it is. If you follow Meka's political career, she was in Cabinet in 2017. She was removed on a issue of bullying. And I think she was very lucky to be made a minister in 2020. But it was minister outside of Cabinet. And I think that she was passed over 3 times for going back into Cabinet, which I think was wishful thinking on her part. I don't think that was ever going to happen. But the 3rd time she was passed over was by another Maori woman, Willow Jean Prime. And I think that is the straw that will break the camel's back. However, I would say that in support of what Oriini's just said, here's a quote. "The bond between the New Zealand Labour Party and the electorate of Ikaroa Rāwhiti is unique and entrenched in its own right." That is a quote from Meka Whaitari's maiden speech. I don't think she'll hold the seat.
Yeah, well, it is a stronghold. It's a Labour stronghold. And I want to talk to you about that a little more, but what should the people of Ikaroa Rāwhiti think, Jenny? Because, you know, we heard from Rawiri, it's going to be more effective for them, for Meka to be on the outside.
Well, absolutely not. Everyone knows that you have to be inside the government to have those levers and pull those levers, particularly in the situation which she has just abandoned, her area under, you know, the following the cyclone and the work that needs to continue to help them, because that should have been her focus, not personal ambition. So for her to suddenly, and she has to account for her actions now. There's been no contact up till this morning with her whips inside Labour, so they still don't know why she has left. She made the approach, it was my understanding, to the Māori Party, so she obviously had this planned out, and it'll be up to her to decide how she will face her electorate after that, because let's look at it, 10 years ago, almost to the day, was the death of Parikura Horomia, so the timing is really coincidental around that. So we're seeing a snapshot, I believe, you know, a real-time live snapshot of what will the coalition, if they are in that position, look like come the election.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, Mike, because is the Māori Party going to be in the kingmaker position? It doesn't sound like it anymore, does it? With Luxon ruling them out?
Look, I think that's possible, but I would make a point. I don't know Meka Whaitari except by reputation. I did know Parikura Horomia, and he will be turning in his grave. He was a solid Labour man. I think that Rawiri made quite a big mistake. He left the door open for a coalition with the National Party in that presentation he gave to you. Now, they didn't learn from their previous experience. They were in a coalition with the National Party and they got wiped out. They lost every seat. So I think he's got to be very careful about that particular aspect of his selling point. And, you know, you can't be left, right or nothing. You've got to be one or the other.
Oriini, there is a lot of heat and a lot of noise around the Māori Party, but translating that into political gains is tricky, isn't it? That's where the real work begins, though.
Absolutely, and I didn't really quite get that from Rawiri's kōrero with you today. You know, speaking of or likening the lay of the political spread, I suppose, with Labour being on one side of the House and National being the other, and, you know, the teko or the kōrero is what Rawiri is saying the Māori Party is. But how do you translate that into actual political gains? I don't know. Is that saying, well, they're going to be the spearhead and go out there and fight in the middle? Well, we have other political parties who do that as well, and I'm not saying that the Māori Party isn't doing that, they are, but the gains is where it matters most, and as you know, we haven't really seen that, and I'm actually really interested to see what Meka can actually physically bring to Te Pāti Māori and crossing the floor and going over to Te Pāti Māori. Does she stand by everything that they've been pushing for this last term in terms of, you know, divorcing the Crown, GST, taxing Kai, you know, bringing that down? Does she actually wholeheartedly support everything that Debbie and Rawiri have been spilling for the last 3 years in Parliament? I beg to differ whether or not she's actually fully fledged into the Māori Party psyche at the moment. So that's what I'm interested in. I also want to pick up on the Ikarua Rāwhiti constituency. I think it is unfair to drop the ball on her constituency when she was in the position of power. She held the power and she relinquished that. And I think that her own people would kind of feel disheartened. It is a strong Labour fort, Te Karua Tai Rāwhiti, so I think that Te Pāti Māori are being very premature in saying that they're going to take that seat. They're undermining their own constituents who are very Labour, in a Labour electorate, just like Te Hauauru, with Adrian Rurafi, with the Rātana stronghold down in Te Taitonga with Rino Tirikātini. The Tirikātini brand is very strong down in Te Waipounamu. So I think Te Pāti Māori just needs to play it, a little bit more cautiously without coming out and being the bull in a tea shop kind of thing.
That's not really how they roll, though, is it?